Welcome back. And we're moving into our first conversation this morning as we once again discuss the decriminalization of small portions of marijuana. Now, the particular phase that we're at is where a national consultation will be held by the Attorney General's Ministry. And so we're joined at this time by Solicitor General Nigel Hawke and Crown Counsel Odwin Trenton. Good morning. And welcome.
Good morning.
Thank you very much.
And my first question would definitely be, why are the consultations being held now, at this point?
Well, I mean, the consultation were part of a schedule that CARICOM had set up initially. There was a previous date they had selected for Belize. However, due to our own constraints, we could not meet that date in October, and as such, we had deferred to November the 23rd. The government has its own priority in terms of legislation that will be passed, and it did not run in tandem with CARICOM's schedule, but in advance, which is actually something that is ahead of what CARICOM would have probably expected.
Let's broaden the discussion to talk a bit about the Regional Commission on Marijuana. While we've spoken very much about the local context and how the amendments will affect users in Belize,
Yes.
What is the purpose of the Regional Commission on Marijuana?
Well, fundamentally, the Regional Commission is coming to carry out consultations. Well, it's regional consultations. For us in Belize, it's going to be tomorrow. Fundamentally, it's a fact-finding mission, as we understand it, based on the terms of reference. Basically looking at the pros and the cons in respect of the classification of marijuana, because marijuana is really classified as a dangerous drug. So what the commission is going to be looking at is whether the positives and the negatives in respect to the use of marijuana, with the ultimate view of putting together a report making recommendations to, which is the ultimate head of the CARICOM, which is the heads of government, recommendations to the heads of government to the CARICOM. So fundamentally, that is what it is: a fact-finding mission, scoping mission, and they want to have wide consultations on the issue.
You see, in the context of declassification of marijuana as a drug or a dangerous drug in the Misuse of Drug Act, it puts us in a place where, since Belize is decriminalized, you know, the conversation needs to be had: is this still considered a dangerous drug? Based on new scientific developments in the field of the marijuana industry, is marijuana and its medical use more useful and more beneficial so as to require declassification? I think those are the things that they would want to discuss with the public, since it is the public that inevitably will be affected by this, of course.
So who will be invited to the consultation?
Well, there are two things that are happening. We have a consultation starting tomorrow, which will be addressing certain focus groups. Like they have the youth starting as the first focus group. You'll have the churches, the state-based faith-based organizations, and you also have medical practitioners and advocates of marijuana.
For marijuana.
So there are different slots stated for them. They will meet with the commission to share their views.
And of course, there's a town hall after for the general public.
Which
to
is an
attend,
open consultation.
Which is open,
Yeah.
yes.
Now, it's interesting you call it a fact-finding mission, because I find oftentimes when there is disagreement on this issue, a lot of people lose sight of the facts. And my question is it more of understanding the perceptions that people have with the particular classification of marijuana as is?
I think it would be the perception and the misperception in a sense. At this point, the fact-finding mission is really to keep the public informed as to the developments of marijuana and the marijuana industry. Previously or traditionally, we would have stuck to a very restrictive approach or view or narrow view on marijuana. And I think that's where the conflict arises, where society has somewhat emerged in terms of its liberal views, and it's conflicting now with the moral views that were necessarily informed by our Christian roots in most of the Caribbean countries. So the fact-finding mission is really to ascertain from the public, is this really the view of the majority in the context of a democracy? Or is it something that is hinged on a religious-based background that is not necessarily the majority of views today? I guess that's the context of the fact-finding.
It's also unique in this sense. it's going to be a national conversation, one, but under the same scope is also going to be regional. Because when this report is finished, we're going to see what the other jurisdictions have to say, what are their concerns and so on. So it will certainly inure to our benefit as a country, seeing the views, thoughts and ideas of other jurisdictions also.
Have the consultations been held in any other country as yet?
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
Okay. So we would be...
Antigua, Montserrat. I think Belize is down the line. They have done several consultations so far. And most of the issues are similar, of course, because we are similar in terms of demographics and social issues, of course.
But we are at a different point than the other Caribbean countries.
Yes, except
with
for
the exception
of Jamaica, of course.
Yeah. Which will also be included in the consultation.
Yes, certainly.
Now, I appreciate what you said, Odwin, about the moral aspect of this conversation.
Yes.
But I would venture to say it goes beyond what the churches have taught us. This is a part of everyday education in school. You know, when you're in science class as a young child, you learned what were the bad things and what were the good things. And marijuana has always been classified as one of the bad things. From this consultation, what is the end result in terms of correcting misinformation if necessary, or reinforcing education that we have already been taught?
I think the idea is exactly what you said. Bearing on what the report says and the recommendations, we certainly think, based on those recommendations, it would certainly aid us in how we should approach the whole issue as a nation, in terms of whether we need to re-engineer ourselves in terms of our thinking, in terms of marijuana and so on. So I think this is critical for us. Another point that we need to understand, and which is a part of the terms of reference of the Commission really, as a focus, is this whole issue of our judicial system being impacted by persons who are incarcerated for sums of marijuana that are very, very small. And you're really talking about a system where right throughout the Caribbean, our penal system is under pressure because there are several persons in there who quite properly should not be there.
And that creates a backlog and a bottleneck, and you know, affects the court's docket, and you know, creates delay in the system as well. Now,
how does this regional consultation fit in context of our recently passed amendment?
I think it fits well because, as Mr. Trenton said, we're kind of ahead in that we amended. I think the conversation that we're hoping to have tomorrow would even be more lively because of where we are, and that is our hope. We want every person to come out. You want to hear your views. We're not to the stage where we're saying we're going to legalize, have a carte blanche legalization of marijuana. It may very well be that we get there in this conversation. We don't know. But what we want to do is to have a comprehensive discussion on the issue. Not just on the streets, because you hear people talking and you hear a lot of misconceptions and so on. But we want to really have a nice, informed conversation. And mind you, the chairperson of the commission is Professor Rosemary Bell-Antoine, who's a very, very esteemed academic around the region.
And, so around the world, I must say as well.
Now, I asked that specific question because you know there are dissenting sectors when it comes to the amendment. Yes. For example, when you have your focus group, will the churches, will their particular contribution at this consultation have any effect in any potential restructuring or implementation of our amendment?
Well, it's difficult to say, but we certainly think that we want to hear the views of the churches, and we think that based on what the commission puts forward to the heads of government, it will certainly inform the process. And mind you, even when this commission would have put forward their recommendations to the heads of government, there's still a body that really advises the heads of government, which is the Legal Affairs Committee of CARICOM. So it will still have to go to them, and we think this is the type of conversation that we want to have, this is the type of regime, a mechanism we want to have in terms of the whole issue of the use of marijuana, and you have the whole new concept now of the medical use of marijuana. All those issues will come to the fore.
You see, I think there's a need to continue dialogue so that regardless of the decision made at the end of the day, it is still going to be inclusive. A dissenting opinion is still included in a decision. It is considered. And in order for it to be considered, there must be continuous dialogue. Of course, the church has a role to play, and they will continue to play that role of a benevolent dictator, and that's just the way it is.
Now, who leads the discussion? What is the format that we're looking at?
Well, we are fundamentally just coordinating, and basically it's going to be the commissioners of the regional marijuana commission that will be leading. The chair lady of that commission will be taking the lead in relation to the consultations when they meet with the different focus groups. So we think critical to the entire process tomorrow is the notion of a type of a town hall meeting in the evening where the entire public is invited, and that is where we think we're going to have even more comprehensive discussions.
Yeah.
And I mean, the commission is leading in essence as well to bring that objectivity to the forum.
Objectivity.
Yeah.
You know, so that the ulterior motives or interests are set aside,
Yeah.
and we can really deal with the issue of how is this new position on marijuana going to affect the society of Belize.
I appreciate you saying that, because I think if people view the Attorney General's involvement,
Yes.
the Attorney General's ministry involvement, they'll feel that the consultations are really saying, this
Yes.
is why we did it.
No, not at all.
But it is a separate regional entity
Yes.
coming in to gauge the perceptions
Yes.
and understandings of the different focus groups and also the wider public.
Of course.
Yeah.
This
When
is a
does,
CARICOM mission.
when does the public consultation take place?
Starts tomorrow. It's going to be at the Biltmore Plaza. It starts at 8:30 tomorrow. Each focus group has been allotted a certain time. So I think we deal with the youth first, and then we have the faith-based organizations coming in second, and then you have the practitioners, medical practitioners and advocates, marijuana researchers and so on. Those are
Who
the three
classifies
focus
as an
groups.
advocate for marijuana? There seem to be quite a few.
I guess anyone might be fall into that category. But
However,
what
the focus
they've
groups have a
restricted.
capacity
Yeah, they're
of
restricted.
25, I
Yeah.
believe, for each
Yeah.
group. So that the discussions would be wholesome. Not that we're trying to lock out anyone's opinions, of course, but so that we would have a focused discussion. I mean, that's why it's a focus group.
Now, I hear let me just ask the obvious question. A consultation like this seems to be very worthwhile in getting a very thorough understanding as to what the people of many different sectors think, feel, and want when it comes to marijuana.
Yes.
So let's look back in our local context.
Right.
Why wasn't something like this held before our amendment?
Well, it's a good question, and I mean, in hindsight, you might say probably that should have been dealt with. But I think the local marijuana committee
Commission.
did a lot of work
Indeed.
in relation to consultations and so on.
And they're-
So I don't think
and
it's
they're-
fair to say that we didn't do anything.
And
They did a
and
lot
their
of research.
recommendations were taken into context,
con-
of course,
yeah.
in the passing of the new legislation, the new amendment, of course, to the legislation. And I read that report, and it is a wholesome report that included a lot of dialogue with people on the streets, a lot of dialogue with professionals, very much a microcosm of what is happening regionally with what the Regional Marijuana Commission is doing. So those persons must be credited for their efforts, and the persons engaged must also be credited as well. But at that stage, at this stage, you can expect a level of boldness from the public. At that stage, it was before the passing of any amendment to facilitate those who are bold. So it was the consultation was very silent, and anonymity played a role. So, I mean, the work was done indeed before the government was informed.
So it's not as though it's unfair to say
I know
cabinet,
there was a report.
acted on its own, but it is really that local committee to really inform the process. And quite frankly, I think as part of this even regional process, we've invited the local committee to play a big role in our conversations tomorrow, because they would have done a lot of groundwork on this issue.
And remember, this is only one step. It's merely a decriminalization. There are many prohibited acts in the Misuse of Drugs Act as it relates to marijuana usage or anything to do with the marijuana industry, which includes importation, exportation, etc., cultivation, etc. So this is only one step. It's the decriminalization. So it's perfect to have a conversation now to see where we go as regards the marijuana industry and Belize.
So the terms of reference, as we pointed out, is looking at, as you've mentioned already, is looking at how people view the drug
Drugs.
and the specific classification.
Yes.
Are you also looking or exploring the legal aspects?
They're looking at the social impact, the
Economic.
health, economic, and legal.
And the legal. So those 4 categories will be fully explored.
So it's going to be a very comprehensive discussion. One of the issues, I guess, that will come up tomorrow is this notion. I think we've had a look at the law. And I think what the drafters has advised is that even in Belize now, there's already provision in our law with respect to the medical use of marijuana, but I don't think the issue has been explored that much. So it is our hope that in this national conversation and regional conversation, that issue will certainly throw up itself.
And it's important, Belize as an open economy and as a developing economy, to consider also the economic benefits of a marijuana industry, and that is properly monitored and controlled, of course. It is important for open economies to have these self-generating economic generators. So we should consider that and its sustainability as well.
We just want to say, at least we want to say, we consider ourselves a very mature ministry, and we know the churches have a certain view, but we want to hear those views. Let us have a national conversation about it. We can disagree to agree, but the idea is, at the end of the day, there would have been full and informed discussions on the issue.
Of course, and this is the way it must be in a diversity.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Even when someone speaks against what you believe,
Yeah,
you
of
must be able to listen
Yes.
and
To respect
understand
that.
their points of view. I think what needs to be most clear is that this particular consultation is not to inform or change the Belize Amendment.
No,
This is
no.
feeding into a
Regional-
regional report
regional
that will
initiative.
then go to heads of CARICOM
Which will be discussed wholesomely. And
for them to make whatever decision, declaration, position they want to make
Of course.
on the classification of marijuana.
Yes.
Okay. But do you have some insight that perhaps if there are great ideas or concerns that come out, when the Attorney General was here, he said, this law isn't perfect. I'm using my own words, of course. He said, this law isn't perfect. There are some areas where we will kind of wait and see whether or not challenges will step forward. Maybe some people are being too fatalistic, or perhaps they will be able to run smoothly. So if legitimate concerns come out or recommendations come out from the consultations, are you also doing your own reports to see if it can feed into our system?
I think that will be the fundamental purpose of the report, because quite frankly, you may pass legislation to address one mischief, and you may create another.
Indeed.
That is just a fact of life, and it's a reality that we have to face. But I continue to say, the fundamental issues for us to have full and informed discussions on the issue in a mature manner.
Indeed, because the efforts that we've tried previously are not necessarily effective. So we must try new ways to assist our society in developing.
So what is the timeline for this particular consultation that's taking place in the region?
I think they have a mandate of, we can't say the exact time frame, but I think because of logistics, they have to try to touch almost every jurisdiction within CARICOM. They've done a few already. We're going to be tomorrow. So I think it's over a next couple of weeks. I know the Christmas period is soon approaching,
Yeah.
Yes.
but certainly I think into next year, there's going to be a heads of conference meeting, I think in February of next year, if I'm not missing. So I'm assuming the target is to meet that deadline to have a report to the heads of government for that period.
And we've seen, some articles circulating on Facebook where the police aren't 100% on board with the decriminalization of marijuana for various reasons. So my question then would be, wouldn't they be maybe the first people that the first group that you try to get on board when discussing?
Law enforcement is a part, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think law enforcement is a critical component of the discussions tomorrow. Because honestly, the law enforcement would have a certain view having regard to their modus of operating enforcement. So it is critical that they be involved also, and I think they're involved as part of the focus group. I think at least the commissioner and the senior officers have been invited.
Now, looking at this issue in general, and you know, we very clearly stated in the beginning that there are some areas where persons have pretty much adapted to wrong information, and it's for those who support and for those who don't support. We know that there's also a sensitization process coming out of the Attorney General's ministry. Can we address some of the common misconceptions and misinformation that are out there about marijuana, the decriminalization and usage?
Well, I think
We have the opportunity. So
one of the first ones is that I think people should know it is not a carte blanche legalization of the use of marijuana. And I think even with respect to the recent amendment that we passed, it has certain built-in restrictions. As the Honorable Attorney General said, we've basically lessened the onus of use. It doesn't mean that you could be indiscriminate and use it as you like. There are restrictions in relation to using it in public, at schools, and so on. So I think the public has this general notion that once there's a decriminalization, it's a legalization. But that is not the case at all. I mean, we might eventually get there, but we have to take baby steps.
Indeed. And it's only a small step. And the amendment is merely a framework for which the regulations will soon be developed so that the government can have a proper approach to it. People need not to be afraid of it in that sense. It's only a decriminalization of 10 grams. It's not allowing cultivation or trafficking or exportation or importation. Those are still offenses under the Misuse of Drugs Act. As I said, there are several prohibitory acts as it relates to the Misuse of Drugs Act and marijuana, and possession is one of them, and at this point possession is what is being attacked, and the decriminalization is addressing possession and merely the consumer
of under 10 grams.
Of under 10 grams.
Yeah.
We should add also that, you know, there's also a move by the judiciary to introduce what they call a drug treatment court, which is also a kind of a diversion, getting persons out of the system, so as to reduce the load on the penal and the prison. So that is also in training. It is our hope that sometime in the future we will be able to have, well, the legislation has already been drafted.
Yeah.
It is just now to put all the other mechanisms in place. And we should see this as
let me
really
be
a
devil's
help.
advocate there, though, because, and I think a drug, you know, we've heard of the move towards establishing a drug court, from the Chief Justice in the opening of the Supreme Court several times.
Yes.
But we also know it's a ministry strapped for resources.
Yeah.
So in terms of realistically being able to move in that direction,
I think it is still it could still be a reality for the simple fact that what was the idea behind it is to try it as a pilot project, even just in the Belize district, so that you don't launch it countrywide. Try it as a pilot project, and if you see monitors to see how it works, then you could introduce it. So I think it can work, but I think we need to try it, and I think we as a society sometimes you need to try new things to see if we can try to aid and better our system. Really and truly, our prison system is under heavy pressure. Those persons who are being remanded there.
And so for the consultation, since you're saying that there won't be, the law won't change, then why would the churches in that case, then why would they attend if they know that, I mean, we'll be listening, but we don't know that what we have to say will even matter? Why should they attend?
Well, I would say they should attend because fundamentally the churches always has a voice and should always have a voice in any society. Whether what they say is taken on board or not, our democracy, our type of societal ethos encourages that type of discussion. So even as a church, you might have a fundamental disagreement with certain issues, but it doesn't mean that you'll be locked out.
I mean, and that's the church's role, and we have to respect it.
We have to respect
They're
it.
dogmatic in their views, and as it should be. They are representing a religion, and religions are to be taken as a serious thing. Even it's a moral guideline. However, we live in a diverse society. Belize always boasts the fact that you are an inclusive society. You have so many races, so many religious groups. You know, this is a multiracial society, a melting pot of cultures. And as such, that melting pot must take into consideration the views of every sector of that society if it is to represent the persons, so that those individuals don't feel as if they are being left out or ostracized, or that their views are not being taken into consideration. In this situation, the church just has the lower voice. But in other situations, the churches are respected. And that this is the situation we live in life generally. We don't always have the final say in everything we do. Yeah, sometimes we paddle upstream.
All I would add is that let's not fight. Let us work together for the betterment of the country. Let's have an informed discussion about it.
Yeah, and as the purpose of the consultation, as we said before, is to be able to present. It is an opinion-based consultation. It's what your thoughts are and what you feel and why you feel that way, based on the focus group format.
And it shows values for everyone's opinion and everyone's thoughts on the issue. And I think that is something that CARICOM is to be commended for even taking the initiative to have this discussion, as much as it is something that will, in essence, affect our society, cause a cultural shift in terms of what people are used to. But it is something that our regional organizations must take the forefront on issues like these.
Yeah, yeah. And when you talk about the regional bodies, this has been on the table for discussion for quite some time.
Yes.
For CARICOM, for SICA, and even OAS.
Yes.
And I think we've seen studies out of the OAS. That's the one that talked about the young people and their usage with drugs in general. Is there also any form of formal study that will come as a part of this commission, as you know of, other than focus groups?
It may be that out of this report there will be other studies that will come that will also, or could be that when the report is submitted to the heads of government, it could be that they may not be convinced with certain issues and will require a commission for the reports, scientific reports or research, as the case may be. Because you have to remember, the heads of government is the supreme making body of the CARICOM under the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas.
And this is interesting because then it encourages research. When with research comes information, and then the people will be more informed and more educated, regardless of what decision is the final one as regards legislation or the laws.
Do we have any mechanism in place where we will be sharing, because with Jamaica and Belize being the front runners on this issue, obviously the other Caribbean countries will be looking at us to understand what worked and what didn't work. Do we have any formal reporting mechanisms currently that we will be sharing our experiences with CARICOM?
Well, I mean, we're here. Unfortunately, we might be still in our embryonic stage of the decriminalization, but certainly
the users don't feel that way.
certainly the little that we've seen so far, certainly we'll be able to share with the commissioners as to what we've observed so far, at least some of the thoughts and conversations that we've had since the passage of the amendment, but certainly to that extent we will be able to.
And I mean, one of the general international law principles for like organizations like CARICOM is regional cooperation and international cooperation. So countries no doubt have mechanisms and avenues that we can have other bilateral consultations as well with other countries. Even with Jamaica, as it regards, they're a step ahead of us, and we being a step ahead of the others.
All right, and tell us a bit, once again, the details of the consultation.
Yes,
so people can know where to go.
It's going to be on November 3rd. It's an all-day thing. However, the focus groups... Tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah.
November 23rd, yes.
Yeah.
It's an all-day thing. It's at Best Western Biltmore Plaza. It's going to be the tapir room. And it starts at 8:30.
8:30.
And those who are a part of the selective focus groups have already been selected?
We've already notified several of the focus groups, and I think we've indicated to them that there's a maximum of 30 persons per focus group. That is why we're also saying we know people might be very enthusiastic about this issue, even if you don't get to go to the focus groups. You have a town hall type meeting in the evening, which we think will be open to the public, and feel free to come out. We want persons to come out and share so that the regional report can also be representative of Belize, the views of Belize, so it can certainly aid the heads of government in making their decision.
And what time will the town hall be?
It starts about 5:30 and it runs to about 8. We anticipate in the evening, 8 to 8:30.
Will that be televised or?
Well, if you members of the media are free to come and televise, you are invited as part of the process because we want to share the knowledge, certainly.
And of course, we want to encourage a respectful forum where people respect the views of each other.
others.
And, you know, let us have a wholesome discussion for something that will benefit the people of Belize.
Okay, all right. So I guess that's what people need to know about the consultations that are taking place. We appreciate you coming in to provide clarity as to how this fits into the Belizean context and into the regional context as well.
Thank you.
Thank
for
you.
having
Thank you.
us.
We thank you for
Thank you
having
for
us.
having us.
All right, we're going to go ahead now and take a break. And when we come back, we'll be joined by the Informed Team Reporters. So stay tuned.